We now have an actual humanitarian crisis on the border that only underscores the need to drop the politics and fix our immigration system once and for all. I'm beginning a new effort to fix as much of our immigration system as I can on my own, without Congress. As a first step, I'm directing the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Attorney General to move available and appropriate resources from our interior to the border. Protecting public safety and deporting dangerous criminals has been and will remain the top priority, but we are going to refocus our efforts where we can to make sure we do what it takes to keep our border secure.
A lot more gray hairs for the president these days. You can certainly see why. All right, let's go ahead and take your pick. President Barack Obama has either acted exactly as a president should when elected officials in Washington cannot get their act together, or he has overreached in his authority, been caught by the highest court in the land, and yet still insists he can break the law with impunity whenever he wants. All right, place your bets. Step to the table now. Welcome into Midpoint, the senior writer for the Washington Examiner, where he has covered Congress and the White House for more than a dozen years, and previously a correspondent for Investors Business Daily. Sean Higgins joins us today. Sean, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Sean, the first thing that comes to mind in this entire situation is the Republicans had to know that something like this was going to happen, and they were just looking to push this as far as they could and push the president to this line. You think?
I'm not so sure I believe that's entirely the case. I mean, I just think part of this simply the administration just doesn't really want to deal with Congress a whole lot beyond simply telling them what to do, and they don't really seem to understand that it's a co-equal branch of Congress and they need to work with them on things. I mean, one of the persistent problems with the president and his relationship with Congress is he seems to think Congress exists to enact his agenda and not to work with Congress to do things. I mean, even President Clinton, who remember was impeached by Congress, still managed to work with them and get more things through because he sort of seemed to understand that he needed to wheel and deal with them. And this administration doesn't seem interested in doing that.
What is the feeling in and around the Beltway regarding John Boehner, his role in all this? And certainly we have to discuss the role of the lawsuit that has been brought up. We've had a couple of legal scholars, one recently that told us there really is no merit to the lawsuit whatsoever. It simply is there just to galvanize the base.
There's probably something to that. I mean, this is Washington, D.C., this is politics. But you have to understand, it really is an administration that has had a serious problem with understanding the whole concept of the balance of powers doctrine. I mean, the Supreme Court last week in the case Noel Canning basically slapped down several of the president's recess appointees, fundamentally pointing out that they just attempted to circumvent Congress in the usual appointments process because they thought they could. I mean, the White House's whole definite explanation for it was, well, we get to determine when the Senate is in session or not in session, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that, and that was pretty much unanimous decision, at least as far as that part went.
When we get down to this, and you even mentioned this, understanding that balance of power, and I think that's a fair sign here because we've heard that from a lot of people. But this is still an administration that has been in power now for 6 years. They have 2 more years left to go. The American people, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, will ask the question, how can you not understand it? And to them, that just seems like nothing more than hubris at this point to push through whatever you want, whenever you want. The ships be damned, I'm just moving ahead without you and I don't care. It really is an interesting thing that the American people are asking, how can it continue to go on?
Yeah, it's even more interesting than that because bear in mind this president was a constitutional law lecturer, prior to being president of the United States, but he doesn't seem to have frankly thought a whole lot about it in certain cases. He's been slapped down by the Supreme Court in numerous cases in other courts. And it really is interesting. Part of the problem, I think, is that he doesn't actually have a whole lot of political experience. I mean, you have to understand he didn't even finish a full Senate term before he was elected president. And prior to that, he'd been a state legislator in Illinois and hadn't done that for very long. I mean, he really has had an extraordinarily fast meteoric rise to power, and I think that's part of the problem here, is that he really hasn't had to, spend a lot of time working with people he disagrees with in an attempt to get legislation through. He seems to believe that they just sort of exist to enact his will, and he doesn't understand that it's not always going to be that way.
The president is taking as much time as he can to vilify Republicans for this, and certainly there are those who are on his team who will do exactly the same thing. In your opinion, covering the story, being around Washington, has Washington itself in essence, grown tired of this, that this constant line is continuing, and maybe it's just worn its course at this point. Maybe the president needs to understand that it's over at this point. You can continue to vilify, but you're just not going to get anywhere with it because we've heard it all before too many times.
Well, certainly, I think there's a fair sense of weariness among people in this town. On the other hand, I don't see it ending anytime soon. There doesn't seem to be any sort of off-ramp here that's appearing anywhere on the horizon. As far as the Democrats are concerned, this is nevertheless a winning strategy that they're, tarring the Republicans as obstructionists, and that's helping them, win votes. As far as the Republicans are concerned, there's no advantage to be gained to working with the president on things. Because he is not interested in meeting them halfway, and there's not much to be gained from caving to some of his requests either. And so I think it's going to continue until one side or the other starts to realize that it's not working for them, and that doesn't appear to be happening anytime soon. So I think we'll see this going for a while.
We continue to hear the possibility that sometime in the summer the Republicans may have some form of an immigration reform legislation here to at least bring to the table. Is that just so much hot air at this point? Because it doesn't make a difference. You can say everything you want to bring in, but as far as anybody else is concerned, who's in authority and who understands what goes on in Washington, this is the immigration reform are two words. It just needs to go away until after the 2016 election.
Yeah, we've been in a holding pattern in terms of immigration with the comprehensive bill just around the corner for close to a decade now. I mean, you have to remember this goes back to the Kennedy-McCain period when they had a bipartisan comprehensive bill that was just ready to go, and we just needed to get one or two things done and everything would happen. And it didn't happen then, and it hasn't happened since then. The bottom line is, for all the talk, there really isn't any bipartisan majority for any type of reform, one way or the other, frankly. There's an attempt to keep talking about it like it's going to happen because A, that helps certain people's agendas, and B, they're trying to create a sense of inevitability that this is going to have to happen. But, I don't see anything, certainly nothing coming through legislatively. Now, it is possible that the White House will decide to do something via executive action, although I think I'm a bit skeptical of that, too, because I think if they really were intending to do that, they probably would have done it already. There's some speculation that they're simply afraid to do it, at least before the midterm elections, because that'll hurt some Democrats in red state areas.
I think that's a proper way to put it. Unfortunately, we're all out of time. Hey, Sean, thanks so much for taking a couple of minutes to join us. We'll do it again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll take a break, come back, head for New York on Midpoint.